All right, today's daf is Tzadi Beis, Friday's daf, and today's noise is brought to you by BWI Airport. Yesterday we were talking about the Sar Shel Esav fighting with Yaakov Avinu as the backstory behind the Gid Hanosha Isser, and now the Gemara moves on to the topic of Malachim in general, Mesaveh. We're picking it up on Tzadi Aleph and Beis, 5 lines before the lines get wide. The Brisa says, Chaviv in Yisrael, Lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Yoser mi Malachi Asharis. The Klal Yisrael is even more chashiv to Hashem than the Malachim themselves. Why? Shei Yisrael, Imrim Shira B'chol Shah. We can say Shira whenever. Malachi Asharis, they don't get to say Shira whenever they want. Ein Imrim Shira Ela Pamachas Bayayim, only once a day. V'amri la Pamachas B'Shabbos, once a week. V'amri la Pamachas B'Chodesh, V'amri la Pamachas B'Shana, V'amri la Pamachas B'Shavua, once in 7 years. V'amri la Pamachas B'Yovel, V'amri la Pamachas B'Olam. Just once, period. However, V'Yisrael, Mazkirin es Hashem, Acher Shtei Tevais. After just 2 words, we get to be Mazkir es Hashem, Shnei Amar Shema Yisrael, Hashem, Elokeinu, etc. Umalachi Asharis, Ein Mazkirin es Hashem ela la'achar shalosh tevais. They only get to say Hashem's name after 3 words. What are the 3 words? K'dichsiv, Kadosh, 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 Hashem tzvakos. Ve'ein Malachi Asharis Imrim Shir L'mayla, Ad she'imru Yisrael L'mata. Shene'amar, V'ron yachad Koich Ve'boiker. That when the Koich Ve'boiker are referring to the Yidden, sing together, then V'hodar V'yorinu Kol B'nei Elikim. That's when the pasuk in Eob tells us that all the Malachim can then sing Shira. But anyway, what's the point of all this? Because the Brisa says the Malachim only say Hashem's name after 3 words. But l'cher it's connected Rav Chananel, who had said yesterday that the 3rd group of Malachim says Kadosh Hashem Tzvakos, and therefore they're really saying the name of Hashem only after 1 word. Now, so the Gemara is going to go back to Rav Chananel's member and say Achas Emeres Kadosh, V'achas Emeres Kadosh Kadosh, V'achas Emeres Kadosh 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 Hashem Tzvakos. So there's 3 groups. Now more about the idea that the Malachim can only say Hashem's name after 3 words. Frak the Gemara V'ha'ika Baruch, where you have Baruch Kved Hashem Kaimai, which is only 2 words, and then you say Hashem's name. Moving over to Talmud Aleph, Baruch Eifanim Hu D'Amri Lei. It's not talking about the Malachim, it's talking about the Eifanim. And Taisus adds the Chayes. But the point is there's different groupings of kinds of Malachim, and therefore it will be negeh for some and not for others. Or V'yiba Yisema, Kiva D'Isyoev Rishusa Isyoev. Malachim can't say anything until they've said the 3 words, but once they have the Rishus, and we've said Kadosh, 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 then they no longer need to say the 3 words before saying Hashem's name, but rather they could say it Baruch Kvod Hashem Mim Kaimai only after the 2 words. And now back to our story with Sar Shel Esav and Yaakov. Vayoshar el Malach Vayuchal Bocha Vayeschanen Loi. There's a pasuk in the 12th parak of Hosea. When it tells the story, pasuk says that he fought with the Malach, he won, he cried, and he asked him for something. But any idea, Minasasar Lami. But based on this pasuk, I don't know who won the fight. Kishu Emer Kisar Risa Im Elikim. But when the pasuk then says that the Malach said to Yaakov Avinu that your name is no longer going to be Yaakov but Yisrael, Have Emer Yaakov Nasasar Lamalach. But Bocha the Yeschanen Loi, the second part of the pasuk that he cried and asked from him, any idea mi Bocha. Who's crying to who? Kishu Omer Vayemer Shalcheni. But when the pasuk says the Malach said to Yaakov to send me away because it became light outside, Vayemer Malach Bocha LeYaakov. Or the pasuk says Kisarisa Imalakim Imanoshim. Omer Rabba Remez Romaz Loisha Sidim Shnei Sarim Lotis Mimenu. The Malach is giving a remez to Yaakov that there are going to be 2 mishpachas coming out. Rosh Goyla Shebebavel, the Nasi Sheberetz Yisrael. That you'll have these powerful dynasties. Mikan Romaz Loi Golus. Based on this, the Malach was giving Yaakov Avinu a remez to the subsequent Golus of the Yidden. The pasuk says by the story of the Sar Hamashkim, etc., by Yosef HaTzadik, Uva, Gefen, Shleisha, Sarigim. That in my dream, Paro says there was a grapevine in front of me, and on this grapevine there were 3 different branches, which is the Sarigim. Omar Rav Chia bar Abba Omar Rav, Elu Shleisha Saregeim Ayetzim Yisrael B'chel Dar V'Dar. The 3 Saregeim, Rashi says they are Ashirim, Akrevim L'Malchus, Big Askanim, and movers and shakers. Pa'omim Sheshnaim Kan Ve'echad Beretz Yisrael. Sometimes 2 of them are here in Bavel, and 1 is in Eretz Yisrael, and Pa'omim Shnaim Beretz Yisrael Ve'echad Mikan. Now we don't really know who these people are, but Yehivu Rabbanan Einahu Rabna Ukva, the Rabna Nechemia ben Brate Derav, that these particular Amoraim fit the bill to maybe be these Askanim. Rava Amar, Elu Shleisha Sarigayim Shemalamdim Schus Al Yisrael B'chol Darvadar. The 3 Sarigim, the 3 branches that are referenced in the pasuk, is talking about the 3 Malachim of the Goyim that are giving a taina to the Bezin Shalmaila in favor of the Yidden. Tanya we learned in the Brisa, Rabbi Eliezer Aimer, Gefen, Zeh Olam. Shleisha Sarigim, Zeh Avram Yitzchak V'Yakov, those are the others. They're the branches that are giving support to the world. Hika Peirachas also Nitza, it was the blossoming and the fruits that came forth. Elu Imahois, Hevshilu Eshkalei Seha Anovim. Anavim. The clusters of grapes, Elu ha-shvatim, shifteka. Amar le Rabbi Yeshua, v'chimaran le la'adam mashahaya. If you're telling me that Pare, his dream was telling us what had happened, meaning the Avos and the Shvatim, etc. V'halei ein maran le la'adam ela masha asiliyos. Dreams are future visions. They're not going to be a historical record of what already happened. Even though Rabbi Aryeh Leibowitz pointed out when he was saying this that we know the Gemara in Bracha says that people dream about what they think about during the day, which is historical record. So we must be talking about different kinds of dreams. But this kind of prophetic dream is only going to be on what is going to happen in the future. Ella, let's retool this parish to talk about things that are happening in the future. Geffen is a Torah, which will be given. Shleisha Sarigim, Elu Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam. Those are the three branches. Vihika Perachas, Olsa, Nitza, Elu Sanhedrin, Hevshilu Eshkelei Seha, Anavim. What are the clusters of grapes? Elu Hatzadikim Shebachol Dar Badar. Omar Rabban Gamliel, Adayin Tzrichananu Lamodoi. We still need the parish of the people from Modoi to Maikim Lekula Bechad Makom. They learn that the whole vision was Lagabe one thing, meaning the branches, blossom, grape clusters. It's all referring to the same Zach. Rabbi Elazar Hamadi Omer, Gefen Ze Yerushalayim, Shleisha Sarigim Ze Mikdash Melech V'Kayin Gadol, V'Hika Perachas also Nitza Elu Pirchei Kahuna, and Hevshilu Eshkelei Se'anavim Elu Nisachim. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi Maikim La B'Matanos. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi interpreted the pshat in this dream was that this was referring to the matanos that Hashem was going to give to the Yidden. To Omer Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Gefen Ze Torah, Shleisha Sarigim Ze Be'er Amud Anan Uman. Those are the three things they got in the midbar. V'Hika Perachas also Nitza. What's that a reference to? Elu Habikurim and Hevshilu Eshkelei Se'anavim Elu Nisachim. Another pshat and pasuk of the dream, Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba Omar, Gefen Elu Yisrael, V'cheinu Omer, Gefen Mimitzrayim Tasiya, Shleisha Sarigim Elu Shleisha Regolim, Shisrael Elim Behen B'chol Shana V'Shana, it's the Gimel Regolim, Hikepei Rachas, Higiyazman Shal Yisrael, Lifreis V'Lirbais, Klal Yisrael will have many children, V'cheinu Omer, Ubnei Yisrael Paru V'Yishritzu, also Nitza is Higiyazman Shal Yisrael Ligoel, there'll come a time for Geula, V'cheinu Omer, V'yez Nitzcham Al Bigdei Kol Malbushe Egalti, Hevshilu Eshkelei Se'anavim, Higiyazman Shal Mitzrayim, that the clusters of grapes is a reference to the Einshim that the Mitzrayim will get by the Yetzias Mitzrayim. Behainu de Omer Rava, Shleisha Kaisais Amurais B'Mitzrayim Lama. Why is there three cups regarding Mitzrayim? If you study the Sar HaMashkim's dream, he's talking about Paro's kais that was in his hand. He squeezed the grapes into Paro's kais and he put that kais back into Paro's hand. So there was three times a reference to the kais. Echad Sheshasa B'mei Moshe by Yetzias Mitzrayim. Ve'echad Sheshasa B'mei Parei Nechai by the time of Nebuchadnezzar. Ve'echad She'asida Lishtais in Kol Evdei Keichavim La'asid Lavai by Zman HaMashiach. Omar le Rabbi Abba le Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba, Ki darish lahu Rav lahani kroi ba'agadata. When Rav would say over this agadata Torah, Kavosich darish lahu, he would say him the same way you did, which is that they are a reference to Yetzias Mitzrayim. Omar Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, Umazu kegefen nimshala. The Yidden are like a grapevine. Zimbayrais shaba, those branches within it, Elu balabatim. Those are the big askanim that support the Yidden. Eshkoilais shaba, those clusters is a reference Elu Talmidei Chachamim. Olin shaba, the leaves is Elu Ameyaretz. And we're not talking about the bad kind of Amaratzim, we're just talking about people who are not that learned, who need to do the work. Kinaiknais shaba, the little tendrils that kind of spin off from the vine, Elu Rekanim Shabi Yisrael. Those are the Balei Avera, that they're still part of Klal Yisrael. Behind the Sholchim Itam, Liboy Rachmim, Iskalya al Alya. Let the clusters daven for the leaves. Dil Mole Alya le Miskaimin Iskalya. If it wasn't for the leaves, those clusters would not survive. Because even the Talmidei Chacham need to have the common folk who are not so learned, who can actually work the fields and enable the Talmidei Chacham to be learning and surviving. The pasuk in the third parak of Isaiah says, "Ve'ekreha li b'chamisha aser kasef." Amar Rabbi Yochanan mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yehoitzadok ein kira ela lashon mechira. It's a lashon of selling. Shene'emar b'kivrei asher karisi li b'chamisha aser ze chamisha aser b'Nisan shebo niglu Yisrael mitzrayim. That's referring to the 15th day of Nisan. Kesef elu tzadikim v'cheinu oimer tzror hakesef lokach biyadai. Referring to the Gemara in Sanhedrin on Tzadi Vav when Hashem took the tzadikim away before Churban Bayis Rishain. Chaimer sa'erim v'lesech sa'erim is elu arba'im v'chamisha tzadikim sha'elu miskayim in bohem. This is a reference to the 45 tzadikim on which the world survives. We're used to saying Lamed Vav tzadikim, here it's 45, but we can see that the pasuk breaks this 45 into a group of 30 and 15 respectively. Veini adeim shleishim kan v'chamisha aser b'Eretz Yisrael, or v'im shleishim b'Eretz Yisrael v'chamisha aser kan. We just don't know how the split works. Which 15 and which 30 are in which location. Kishu aimer ve'ekcha shleishim ha'kesef ve'ashlich oisoi beis Hashem el hayotzer. So heavy aimer shleishim b'Eretz Yisrael v'chamisha aser kan here in Bavel. Omer Abaya v'rubaihu mishtachchi v'bekinishta v'tusei apis. And the Raiv of these tzaddikim in Eretz Yisrael are found in shul, under the afta, which is some part of the structure of the house, meaning they're hidden away. Which the Ben Yehoyada understands this Gemara to mean that if you're looking for these tzaddikim, you ain't going to find them because they're well hidden and not calling attention to themselves. Now, the pasuk says that I took 30 pieces of kesef and I threw it to the Beis Hashem. V'hainu dichsiv v'oymar aleihem im toy beinechem havu sechari v'im loy chadolu v'yishkalu es sechari shleishim kasef. V'Yehuda Omer elu shleishim tzaddikei umas ha'olam she'umas ha'olam eskaimim aleihem. This 30 pieces of kesef are referring to the 30 tzaddikim of the goyim that based on them all the goyim can survive. Ula Omar, another pshat, elu shleishim mitzvahs shekiblu aleim b'nei Noach. These are the 30 mitzvahs that the b'nei Noach were makabel on themselves. Now you may be saying 30, isn't it only Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach? Rashi acknowledges that by saying loy nisparshu, that he doesn't know what these 30 mitzvahs are. But if you do look at the side over here at the Haggais from Rav Ranchberg, he does kind of work through what these 30 mitzvahs should be. But Lamaisa, even though they were makabel shleishim mitzvahs according to Ula, but ve'ein makaimin el shleishim, but they only keep 3 of them. What are the 3 that they keep? Achas, turning over to Midveiz, shein kaisvin ksuva l'zacharim, even though they engage in mishkav zachar, but at least chach, they don't make a marriage document out of it, which maybe doesn't exist anymore now that they've legalized it in the United States. The achas, and still another thing that they do keep, she'ein sheiklin basar ames b'makulin, even when they're usuk in cannibalism, but they still don't weigh it in the meat markets. The achas, and lastly, shemachabdin es hatayra. That one we can get into at least. Okay, that's it for the Agadata today. Now getting back to Perak Gid HaNashe. The Mishnah had said ve'ina noyeg ba'if. There is no Gid HaNashe Isser when it comes to birds because they don't have that kaf yarech shape of their thigh. In fact, the Gemara b'hoka chazina disbay, but they do have that shape. What are we talking about? It might be smaller by a bird, but it is there. And for the Gemara, is le v'loy ogil. It's taka there, but it's not the shape of the ogil like the spoon that the Mishnah had said you needed. Boy Rabbi Yirmiyahu. Let's say it does. Is le la'if v'ogil, or is le lebehema v'loy ogil, or conversely, let's say an animal doesn't have that unique trait. My. Basar didei azlinen, do we look at the specific own animal? Or basar mine azlinen, or we look at the min to which the Gemara blibes, teku. Now this actually does open up the door to a whole host of different shilas about, do we look at specific exceptions to when there's a physicality difference? Or do we only look at the whole min in general? There's actually a Ramban over here that wants to know that why by tefillin does a lefty put his tefillin shel yad on the right arm? Why don't we just go basar the min of people that people are generally righties? And he explains why tefillin might be uniquely different. Then the Mishnah says, v'noyeg b'shalil, that the Gid HaNashe Isser is even going on an Uber. But Rabbi Yehuda said it's not. Rabbi Yehuda says that the shechita of the mother is going to be matir the Gid HaNashe and its chaylev. So Amar Shmuel, the chelbei mutter l'divrei hakol. There is no machlekes when it comes to the chaylev. Everybody holds the chaylev is going to be mutter. So chelbei demai. What kind of chaylev are we talking about? Ilay mit the shlil. If we're talking about the actual chaylev of this ben pakua that was found alive inside the mother, and you're telling me that even though there's a machlekes between the Tanakama, which we understand to be Rav Meir, and Rabbi Yehuda, whether or not there's Gid HaNashe by this Uber, they're still going to both agree. But there is no Isser of Chaylev on this Vlad. I'll tell you, the Hamiflik Pligi Babe, that is a machlekes. The Tanya, the Brisa says, Nohig B'Shlil, that the Gid HaNashe Isser does apply to this Ben Pakua after the Shechita. The Chelboy is Osir. Divrei Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Huda Eimer, Eina Nohig B'Shlil, the Chelboy Mutter. So you see the machlekes applies to both. The Yomer Rabbi Lazar, Omer Rabbi Ishia, machlekes Ben Teishachai, that's talking about a Ben Pakua of a 9-month fetus that was viable, that was alive inside the mother by Shechita. The Holach Rabbi Meir L'Shitasai, that a Ben Pakua is like a regular normal animal. Rabbi Huda L'Shitasai, that it goes along with the Shechita of the mother. So how can you tell me that everybody's going to agree about the chaylev? You see, it's still a machlekes. To which the Gemara says, "Ve'elachel by the gid." We're not talking about the chaylev. You're right, that is still a machlekes. But the chaylev of the gid, that won't be a machlekes. But for the Gemara, hamiflig pligi, but they also argue about that. Did Tanya the Brisa says, "Gid hanoshe mechatet achor b'chol makom shu." You have to kind of dig after it wherever it's located inside the basar. V'chaytech shamnei miikar. You have to take out its fat from ikrei, from its root. Divrei Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda Eimer, goyimai im hashayfi. You just level it off. In other words, you don't have to be so makbid about the chaylev agid. Clearly, Rabbi Yehuda is arguing with Rav Meir, so how can you say they're not arguing? So li'olam chelbei degid enechanami. The Mishnah is taka talking about the chel of degid. Umayde Shmuel till Rabbi Meir midrabanan aser. Shmuel's just being maskim that according to Rav Meir that is only aser midrabanan. But enechanami min hatayra everybody's maskim that the chel of the gid is taka mutter. So the brisa that Rav Meir says you got to dig it out, that's only talking midrabanan. The Tanya, as the brisa says, v'shamnei mutter the Yisrael kedoshim noyga by Yisrael, like we saw yesterday that Klal Yisrael has been more makbid to be noyeg Yisrael with it, even though it's only midrabanan. So my la Rabbi Meir he to omer mutter min hatayra v'aser midrabanan. But the Gemara says actually that's not such a ride because mimai. How do you know the brisa is going like shitas Rav Meir? Dilma Rabbi Yehudahi avol Rabbi Meir midiraisa nam yaser. But maybe according to Rav Meir it's taka aser min hatayra. But the Gemara says it can't be that Rav Meir holds that chaylev of the gid is really aser min hatayra. The Tanya, because the brisa says gid hanasha mechatet achar b'kol mokum shehu v'shamnei mutter. So man shamas leides lechatita. Who's the one who holds that you have the chatita of the gid hanasha? It's got to be Rav Meir. The kamer shamnei mutter, and still that same brisa says mutter vaystois min hatayra. Everybody's masking that it's mutter. mutter, and it's only going to be usher midirabanan. All right, let's just start the next Gemara defining what exactly is the Gid Anasha. Omar Rav Yitzchak bar Shmuel bar Marta Omar Rav. That part of the Gid Anasha that we're talking about as Osir is only the soft edible offshoots of that Gid Anasha. But the Gid Anasha itself, which is absolutely inedible, is like Eitz Ba'alma, and therefore there's no Isser for it. But Ula Amar Eitzu, it is inedible. V'hatayra chayvolav. Hagufa, the Torah saying you can't eat this thing. I don't care the fact that it's not really food, it's still going to be Osir min HaTorah to eat it. Amar Abaya, Kavase du Ula Mistabra. Why? Do Amar of Sheshes, Amar of Asi, Chutin Shebechelev, Asurin Vein Chayav and Alehan. The Chutin, which is some sort of nerves, perhaps blood vessels, that are inside the Chelev, are osir, but you're not going to be chayiv kares for eating them because it's only nisur d'Rabbanan. And alma chelev omer rachmana v'leichutin. When the Torah says chelev's osir, it's only talking about the actual chelev, but not those chutin that are in the chelev. So hachinami gid omer rachmana v'leiknoiknois. When the Torah says you can't eat the Gid Anasha, it's talking about that actual Gid Anasha, the actual non-edible thing, but not those little soft offshoots from it. So we're going to stop here and we'll pick it up with Shabbos' daf with Gufa discussing this topic some more.